Around 5 years ago, my sister graduated from college with a master's degree. She was always wicked smart. She graduated not only with honors but 6 months early as well. Instead of graduating in the beginning of summer, she graduated in the middle of winter. I promised her we'd do something fun when she graduated, and I wasn't one to let the snow stop me. She deserved it. Originally, I had planned to take her to Cancun. She'd been talking about wanting to go there since we were teenagers. It was going to be a surprise. Well, I wasn't about to take her to Cancun in the middle of winter. It just didn't seem logical, even though the weather there is slightly warmer. I still wanted to take her on a vacation, though, one she'd always remember. Taking the weather and everything else into account, I opted to go for a cabin. A nice one, not one of those authentic cabins. It was basically a beach house cosplaying as a cabin. It sat in the middle of a dense forest. It was 3 stories, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a hot tub, 5 flat-screen TVs, heating, AC, a full modernized kitchen, and other miscellaneous luxuries. It was about the same price as Cancun would have been, and we'd be staying an extra 2 days at the cabin than we would have at the hotel in Cancun. When I showed her the cabin and our reservation receipt, my sister was beside herself. Her eyes beamed with excitement. She started to pace and talk quickly, something she's done since we were kids. It's how you could tell when she was genuinely excited about something. I felt like the best sibling in the entire world. I told her we'd be leaving in a couple days and we should start packing right then and there. She was more than happy to oblige. Now, I didn't just randomly pick this cabin. I swear I did my research. I wanted to make this a great time for my sister, and I wanted my money to be well spent. I searched for days, and this was one of the most highly rated cabins in the world. It claimed to be so luxurious that you'd never want to leave. That kind of defeats the purpose of going exploring, right? Weird sales pitch for a cabin, but that went right over my head. The cabin was across the country, and it wasn't snowy. We could still go along the trails and explore the forest without freezing to death. It seemed perfect. The reviews were surprisingly all really well written and said great things. I thought I saw the same comment twice here and there, but thought nothing of it. I think I was about just as excited as she was. 2 days of packing and making more plans than we'd probably have time for, we finally set out for the trip. It was a 12-hour drive, and I think she only slept for about an hour. She talked the whole way there, even when we switched places so I could take a break from driving. We got there around 10 hours after we'd left our house. My sister definitely shaved off some time when she was driving. I'm honestly surprised she didn't get a ticket. You had to drive down a beaten path about 30 minutes into the woods to even reach the cabin. The trail was tight, giving no leeway to swerve. It was surrounded in dense forest. If you walked away from the trail, you'd get lost in minutes. It was eerie. The sun was setting, and the darker it got, the creepier it got. The second we reached the cabin, though, all of those feelings were washed away. It was beautiful, unlike any cabin I've ever seen. The wood was dark and polished. The exterior had a wide front deck that wrapped around the entire first floor of the cabin. You could walk from the front door all the way to the back deck. The back deck had a hot tub that was shielded by a small pavilion. You could access the sliding door to one of the bedrooms from the back, and if you walked up a small flight of stairs, you'd enter the back entrance. It was incredible. We hurried our stuff in and quickly picked out our rooms. After we had settled, we stocked the fridge. I made us each a steak with mashed potatoes, and I pulled out an expensive bottle of wine I had been saving. I poured us each a glass and we ate in the living room so we could find something to watch. Each TV had a streaming service list, and we picked one we already had an account to. We put on a show we'd been watching back home and turned on the fireplace below the TV. Everything was perfect. The next day, we had planned to go exploring along the trails that lay about a quarter-mile from the cabin. We had a map with us and felt pretty confident. We didn't plan to explore for long, but we had to give it a go. I didn't really like hiking or really the woods at all. She loved nature, though, and I loved her. This was all for her, after all. Seeing her enthusiasm about the whole trip was enough for me to put my fears aside and be excited for her. Everything was going so well. We reached the trail in no time. Me being asthmatic, though, I had to stop for a few minutes. I used my inhaler and waited for my breathing to return to normal. After that, we were on our way. Halfway into the trail, I realized my sister hadn't said anything in almost an hour. I thought she was just consumed in the nature surrounding us. It was cool outside, not cold enough to make you shiver, but cold enough to need a jacket. It didn't matter much anyways, as we were sweating like crazy going through the trails. After about 2 hours, I finally broke the silence. "Hey sis, I think we should head back now. What do you think?" I was overwalking, but I tried to sound cheerful. "Okay, I guess." Her voice sounded happy, but I could tell she was shielding disappointment. On our way back, she started to talk very quietly. I was about 10 feet behind her at all times because I wasn't exactly in the best of shape. She was trucking along while I was struggling. I didn't complain though. She seemed to be enjoying herself, even with all the silence. I sprinted for a second to catch up with her. She was still talking, but once I caught up to her, I realized it was more of a mumble. She was mumbling so fast I couldn't make anything out. "Hey? What's up? What are you talking about?" I asked quietly. As soon as the words left my mouth, she went completely silent. "Whoa, I never thought you'd catch up to me. You don't have to strain yourself. Walk at your own pace. I'll slow down." She smiled. "No, I know, I thought you were talking to me. What were you saying?" I asked, a little more concerned. "Nothing. I haven't really said anything since we've been out." "You're losing it already," she said jokingly. She really didn't remember. I thought maybe she just didn't want to tell me. She wasn't known to talk to herself, but we weren't in our usual environment either. Maybe she was just thinking out loud. I guess so. You know the woods creep me out." I tried to remain cheerful. We got back to the cabin around 6 p.m. I was starving. My sister immediately went upstairs to her room and shut the door. I figured she was probably getting a shower and I started dinner. "SAS dinner is ready," I shouted, hoping to get her attention. No response. "Hey, are you good up there?" My voice was quieter this time. No response. I walked up the spiral staircase that led to second floor. I went up to her door and knocked. The door creaked open. After a few moments, she opened it the whole way. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, like she hadn't blinked in an hour. "Are you okay? Dinner is ready." I locked eyes with her. "Yeah, okay, dinner, okay. What's for dinner again?" She sounded confused. "Chicken dumplings, one of your favorites." I smiled, but I was worried. "Okay, I'll be down." She sounded monotone now. Around 9 p.m., she finally came down. Dinner had been cold for hours. I was getting tired. As I was laying down on the living room couch, she walked by without even acknowledging my existence. I watched her grab a plate and 2 dumplings. She ate standing in the kitchen. I looked over again a few minutes later and she was putting her plate in the sink already. "Wow. Hungry much?" I asked lightheartedly. She didn't even look at me. I was officially worried and weirded out now. This wasn't like her at all. She never liked being pressured, so I didn't try to pry information out of her. She didn't even get done rinsing the plate before she was sprinting to bathroom. I could hear her vomiting. I remember asking myself if she could have gotten sick. Even when she was sick, though, she was always bright and cheerful. Not even the highest fever could break this girl's spirit. Was she pregnant? That would explain her sudden mood change and the vomiting. If she was pregnant, she wasn't ready to tell anyone. I wasn't about to ask either. After she didn't come out of the bathroom, I went to see if she needed help. Before I could even reach the bathroom door, she swung it open, her eyes even worse than before. "Thank you for dinner. What a wonderful trip this is. You're an incredible big brother." She smiled so wide I could see every single one of her teeth. "You're welcome," I replied. I was trying to remain calm, but I could feel myself shaking. She bolted past me back up to her room. Now by this point, I knew something was seriously wrong. It wasn't even about the vomiting, the weird and fast mumbling, or the odd behavior. She called me an incredible big brother. I was 2 years younger than her and a girl. I went to call my mother and realized I had no service, only Wi-Fi. I decided to try and download a free texting app that didn't require data, but my calls and texts still wouldn't go through. Around 11 p.m. I went upstairs to go to my room. I could hear a faint scratching sound coming from my sister's room. I quietly made my way over and pressed my ear against the door. My sister was talking fast and almost manic-like. "What a wonderful beach. I love the beach. What a wonderful trip. I'm happy Dad came. I love Dad. Thank you for coming, Dad. What a wonderful trip." Her voice sounded monotone despite the speed. She was talking about our father? To our father? I couldn't tell, but our father had died years ago. Panicked, I grabbed the doorknob to open the door. It was locked. As soon as I tried to open it, though, the scratching stopped. I heard shuffling and then the click of the door unlocking. This time she didn't peek first, she whipped it open. The white part of her eyes were now completely bloodshot. I stared at her and watched a tear of blood roll down her face. She was smiling. "Hey, we're going home tomorrow, okay? You're not well." I tried to sound reassuring. She cocked her head to side. "Okay," she replied, still smiling. I stepped out of the doorway and ran to my room. I quickly gathered all of my things together. I wanted to leave right then, but there's no way I could drive us out of here at night. The vehicle trail was too narrow. All it would take is one wrong swerve, and we'd either go over a cliff or into a tree. I stayed up until I couldn't anymore. Ever since I left my sister's room, it had been silent. I figured she finally went to bed. I tried to stay awake all night, but I finally succumbed to the exhaustion. I only slept for a few hours before I was awoken by a loud bang. It was roughly 8 in the morning. After I was fully awake, I heard another loud bang. It was coming from my sister's room. This time I didn't knock or act stealthily. I barged in her room, which was unlocked to my surprise. She was sitting in the corner of cabin facing the wall. I watched her swing her head back and slam it against the wall. It let out another loud bang. I ran over to her and pulled her away. Her forehead was bruised and bloody. She was still smiling. Behind her, I got a glimpse of the wall. It was absolutely torn to shreds. There was wood all over the carpet. She had scratched into the wood until she reached the middle. The center of the wood was covered in black mold. There were chunks of mold missing. That's when I noticed her once bright smile was a dark gray. She had been eating it. "Come on, we're leaving, now." This time my voice was sharp. "Okay, I'm going to go play in the snow first. Isn't it beautiful?" Her head still cocked to the side, smiling. "No, we're done. You're sick and there's no snow. We're on the West Coast. There's no snow, see?" My voice was growing more panicked as I pulled up the blinds. "See? No snow." I was shaking. "It's beautiful. Daddy said I could go play. He's waiting for me." She straightened her head, still smiling. Before I could grab her arm, she fled down the stairs and out the front door. I tried to chase her, but she was out of my range of vision in minutes. She went toward the trails, but she didn't have the map. There's no way I'd be able to find her if she went off the trails at all. I contemplated my options and opted to get the hell out of that forest. I needed to get a signal. I wasn't going home without her. I made it to the main road in about a half hour. As soon as I was out of the forest, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I had missed calls from my mother and multiple texts from friends. They were all saying how worried they were about me. We hadn't even been here a full 48 hours. Why were they so worried? I called my mother first. She was frantic. "Where have you been? It's been 2 weeks. Everyone is looking for you. Are you okay?" She was in tears. 2 weeks? No way. We pretty much just got here? How could that be possible? My mother said she looked for the cabin everywhere online and couldn't find a single thing about it. It's like it didn't exist, but it did. I was there. We were there. I told my mother about my sister, and she started crying even harder. I couldn't make out a thing she was saying other than that she was coming to pick me up. I Googled the nearest police station and told her I'd be there. When I got to the police station, I was swarmed by police. They started examining me and asking a million questions at once. I remember being scared and them taking me to a hospital. No one was listening about my sister. I was screaming she was lost, but not a single person paid any attention to what I was saying. The next thing I remember was my mother holding my hand while I lay in a hospital bed. "The doctor said you're going to be okay. They pumped your stomach and they've been monitoring your vitals around the clock. They say you're extremely lucky to be alive." My mother's voice was gentle. I started to cry. I didn't understand. I pleaded with my mother to let me talk to the police. We had to find my sister. My mother sighed. The doctor said your hallucinations should start going away soon, she said, still very gentle. What hallucinations? What are you talking about? We need to find her. She ran off into the woods. She's lost and sick. We need... My mother cut me off. Honey, your sister has been dead for over a year now. She's not lost. I'm sorry, honey, I really am. I know it feels fresh, but once you regain your memory, I promise it won't hurt as bad as it does right now. Her gentle voice was calming, but her words were terrifying. I closed my eyes and started to sob. I couldn't understand what was happening. The only thing the doctor isn't sure of is how you managed to consume so much black mold without dying. They're also not sure how you made it the whole way out here without crashing. Do you remember why you even left the house? Her was hand still holding mine. I promised her I would take her on vacation when she graduated. I promised. She deserved it. My voice was faint. I remember you did promise her that, but she's been gone for a while now. Your father and sister knew how much you loved them. Why did you do this? Her voice had lowered into a whisper now. I promised her I would. I promised. My voice now a whisper too. You also promised me you wouldn't stop taking your medication, and there's not a trace of it in your system. She was still whispering. I closed my eyes and fell asleep. When I awoke, I was in the hospital near my house, my mother still beside me. I'm sorry, Mom, I just wanted to see her one more time. I had to keep my promise. My voice sounded hoarse. My mother's eyes filled with tears. You kept your promise to her a while ago, sweetheart. It's not your fault what happened. You can't keep going off of your medication. Last year when you two went camping, she fell down a ravine when you two were hiking. It was an accident. You have to let her go. You have to move on. I can't lose the only child I have left. I haven't stopped taking my medication since. Sometimes I want to, just to see her one more time. I have a new promise to keep, though, and I won't let my mother down again. I want to start out by saying I'm not a cop. I'm not a park ranger. I'm not some Bigfoot hunter that would just run off into the woods for nothing. I don't live in a farmhouse with a shotgun under my bed for the coyote sounds some people just decide are skinwalkers. I've been hiking for as long as I could walk. My dad taught me what specific birds looked like and then what they sounded like. Even now, there's a shelf 5 feet high in my living room stocked with nature books. I knew the differences between local species of woodpeckers before I was 8. I've been a wildlife researcher in Wyoming for maybe 7 years now. I'm a young guy, kind of baby-faced, so I get odd looks a lot when I'm out with all the equipment. It's rural here, mostly livestock. Quiet, apart from when everyone drives up to Cheyenne for the rodeo every year. I can't go anymore. Saw a horse break its leg during the wild horse race, and I never really got over it. Sorry, I am kind of distracted. I had to fill up jerry cans for my truck the other day, and my mind is so all over the place even the station's cashier noticed. It feels really far away what happened to me. 5 days ago, I went into a private swath of forest on the edge of a lake, all owned by some group of enterprising millionaires wanting to build some of those stupid cabins you see on TV with the marble counters, despite the rustic goal. Distracted again. Anyway, I was out there because they found 6 dead elk within 1 week. 1 week. This property is big, but it's not that big. There are wolves in Yellowstone. Not here, and they obviously wanted to know if there was some big fuck-off bear starting to kill for sport. Some of the rich hunters that rented weeks during the season would be angry too if bulls they'd been following on trail cams got eaten before they could be stuck up above the fireplace. The first carcass they marked was 3/4 of a mile in. I'm an alright navigator. Sometimes have trouble getting places, but I'm good at following markers on my way out. I'm pretty visual. It was late morning, maybe 10. I wasn't going to be an idiot and let it get dark. The first body told me it wasn't a bear. I didn't know what my opinion really was yet, or if I ever had one. I don't know if you've ever seen an elk or someone posing with a dead one, but they're big. This one had an almost cartoonish impact imprint in the pine needles, like those craters asteroids leave in movies, like it had been tossed diagonally toward the ground really hard. It was a cow on her side, split from where her jawbone ended at her neck all the way down, between both front legs, down her gut, stopping after her back legs. I noticed almost immediately when, what do? Examine, poke it with a stick. I put my gloves on and took a closer look that whatever it was had almost cleaved her in half, maybe 6 inches to spare. The cut was sharp. I've never seen anything like it. Right through her sternum, the smoothest I'd seen anything like that. With the shoulder-high gloves on, I examined her internally, propping the upper of her front legs up. Her heart and her liver were missing. It scared me. I think I was trying to rationalize it. I got there and saw her, no blood on the ground, with 2 missing organs and guts all neatly in place like they'd been put back when... Yeah, I just told myself it was poachers. When I got to the second carcass, a bull elk, it started to change my mind. I don't know if you've ever been around something decaying or had a mouse die in your house. It doesn't take a lot of flesh to make something stink. You can empty your pool filter too close to the house and still smell the bugs. Neither of them stunk. At all. At the bull, I noticed what I hadn't at the cow. There were no flies. His liver was missing like hers, and though I had trouble leveraging his leg up and got kind of frustrated, I found his heart was missing too. The injuries were the same. Dead, stone cold dead. I've been around a lot of animals that have died in some way or another. Nothing had ever chilled me to my goddamn bones like this did. I was on the way to the third one when I was attacked. I never got to see the third one or the remaining 3 because I ended up having to drive to the clinic after. I'm going to try to give this as much detail as I fucking can remember because I swear I'm not crazy. There were these 2 rocks with a hiking trail between, the path worn by both animals and people. The rocks went up maybe 10 feet on either side, each about the width of how my truck is long with a couple feet between them and the path. I remember thinking I needed to try spikes for my boots because the pine needles this time of year got pretty slippery in places where they were thick. I didn't hear anything really notable. I crushed a pine cone under my boot and then it was on me. It looked like something I'd imagined would crawl out of a cave in the body. Slim, bipedal, but with digitigrade hind legs. It came out of nowhere and it was so quiet. You're going to ask me how I even noticed all of that. And it's because it jumped down from the rocks to land in front of me. I was almost out, and there was a lot of ground behind me to cover. One step back and it pushed its back foot at me. Not all that fast, not a blow, just the way someone would reach for a handshake. It had hooves and I smelled burnt hair. I remember now those videos from that martial arts style where you can do 1-inch punches and... yeah. It felt like a car hit me in the chest. Like I'd taken a hit from a bighorn ram. It crushed the breath out of me and I flew backward. The forest floor broke my fall, and by the time I gasped in air and focused, it was staring me directly in the eyes. Its skin wasn't white, not really. Translucent. I could see its veins and arteries pulsing beneath in the rhythm of a heartbeat pushing so quickly. It was maybe shock, maybe fear that kept me still with it down on all fours like that. I don't think it was breathing. We were so close that I could see the blood vessels in its eyes. It was larger than me, larger than an elk, moose-sized, as big as a fucking full-size van. Its head was a foot wide, maybe more, gaunt and shaped like a bison skull. The skin was stretched over it so tight it looked like it'd rip, its nostrils long slits that went maybe halfway up its head. The eyes that looked into mine were large with no fleshy eyelid, and when it finally blinked, 2 clear lids came in from the outer edges of its eyes. Its scleras, besides the blood vessels, red like us, were so white. Everything's got a little color in its eyes, but this was the whitest white I'd ever seen. There wasn't an iris, and its pupil was just clear, like when they take a photo of the back of your eye at the eye doctor. It felt like I was seeing the inside of its skull and it... Fuck. Sorry, I'm trying to be rational and not get all shivery and supernatural with it. It just stared. I'd worked with dogs when I started my career with animals. It was instinct, maybe, wanting it to be done quick or trying to calm it like I'd talk to dogs with my body language. I tilted my head up and to the side, went limp, closed my eyes. It felt like 2 hours before it moved. It probably was 5 minutes. I opened my eyes when I heard it rustle, but didn't move. It brought up its front foot arm, I guess, stood up a little higher. And that's when I understood. It looked like it had fucking scythes on its hands, a palm shaped like ours, one finger joint, then these claws a foot long, three of them and a thumb that had no claw at all. I thought I almost knew it had cut me in fucking half and I'd be gone, but it moved so slow. It brought that hand up, took one of its four fingers and dragged that claw down from my collarbone. I was wearing a canvas coat with a sweatshirt and thermals underneath. It started to split me. I moved my head like watching a car crash as it sliced through all of my clothing and down into my skin like air. Not like butter, like air. It cut maybe a half-inch into me. Adrenaline is a fucking drug, I'll tell you that. It stopped 2 inches below my belly button, and then it turned and started to walk away like nothing had happened at all. Just moseying. As I sat up a little and started to really feel it, it had turned away from me, stood up tall. The horns it had reminded me of 5 pronghorns spliced, not quite antlers, and now I saw it had floppy bald ears like a pig. I could see where every vertebrae in its body pushed up against the skin, the definition of every muscle like a shaved horse on every steroid. With its skin that clear, it almost blended and reflected the colors around it. I laid there and watched it go until I couldn't see it anymore toward the lake. I think I heard a boat motor. I didn't even care. When managed to get on my feet, I fucking ran. There was paracord in my truck, and I put my jacket on backwards and tied it around me to put on some pressure while I drove to the tiny medical clinic. My brain gets a little spotty right before that. Quiet town, nobody kicked by a horse today. So I got in and the doctor, Jen, I've known her since I moved here, older lady, got to me immediately. I remember that she took the jacket off and went kind of pale, looking at. There wasn't any blood. I could see my flesh split perfectly down the middle. In the mirror on the wall above the sink in the exam room, I saw how well it was centered between the bumps of my collarbones. She told me they'd bandage it, and I just basically sat there in some kind of shock and let them move me around. I don't even remember the drive there or home. It reminded me of autopsy cuts in TV shows with 2 less lines and higher. Jen's an old soul. Her family's been in this state longer than any I can think of. She's 30 but graying at the temples, down to earth. She's sweet and very logical and is tired as hell of telling people Bigfoot doesn't live out here when they find out she's a local and ask. It terrified me when in that empty waiting room escorting me out, she told me in a low voice that I'd better go out see the Joneses because their livestock guardian dog had died. She had this look on her face when she said it, patting my back and just said, a bear. It reminded me of that tone someone uses when someone else says something they don't believe, patronizing. Oh, it was a bear, sure. Just like that. I wanted to throw up. I don't know if she knew. I just left. I feel like I'm being pulled into something terrifying. I've been looking at apartments in Portland all night. I've been trying to draw the thing like I used to with animals back home, but I just can't get it right. I feel like Jen is trying to get me to look into this. I barely know her, but she looked at me like she knew everything about me. Help, I guess. What do I do? A couple of weeks ago, my friend and I set out on a voyage we'd dreamed of for years. A hike on the Appalachian Trail. He's gone now, and I wish we'd never stepped foot onto that path. We live in Tennessee, and all our lives we'd glanced longingly at the various entries to the trail as we'd hiked simpler, more beginner-friendly trails. As we came to the end of our time in college, we made a promise to each other that before we got jobs, we'd hike from Tennessee to Maine. John and I set out from the Smoky Mountains with resources set to last for 6 months. God, the trail was beautiful. We spent our first day just marveling at the scenery that surrounded us. This shit is dense, John chuckled as he pointed to the canopy of leaves that nearly blotted out the morning sun. I chuckled too, but I found myself shrugging off a shiver. Nothing we're not used to, I replied, looking at the uneven ground before me. We really had practiced up for this hike. We got accustomed to the subpar food, the long days of 15-plus-mile walks, and of course sleeping in tents. Even still, I felt my nerves creep up as we forged ahead. It was our 5th night on the trail that we saw them for the first time, eyes peering at us through the brush and trees. "Shit, dude, do you see that?" John's voice was a hiss in my ear. He didn't risk a pointed finger, choosing instead to nudge my elbow gently with his own. I was dead tired from our trek that day. We'd done a solid 18 miles. Not that it matters. "See what? The fucking trip." My shitty remark was cut short as the air left my lungs. Off the trail, maybe a few hundred yards, I spotted the eyes for myself. Just one pair, peering at us through the undergrowth. A bear. Had to be. "Oh, fuck, man," John groaned, the fear so palpable I could imagine the beads of sweat that had surely broken out on his skin. I felt no better. Do we yell?" I stared openly at the eyes, and they stared back at me. It's an awful feeling being hunted, being prey. I had never felt anything like it before. It awakened something primal in me, but I felt no courage. No, we don't know if there's cubs or something around. Maybe it's just curious about us." I had no clue if that was even a factor. All I knew was that we had bear spray in the bags, and I did not want to have to test its effectiveness. I picked up the pace a bit and tugged on John's sleeve to encourage him to do the same. I tore my attention off the eyes, but the feeling in my gut told me that they did not reciprocate. John and I were all but jogging now. There was a bend in the path ahead, and I knew that if we could get around it, we'd break the line of sight. As we turned the corner, I allowed myself one stolen glance at the eyes. Putrid yellow stared back unapologetically. "Fuck!" I spat the word out in the same instant that I lost sight of them. John panted out some expletive of his own, each of us punctuating the last 45 seconds as if they'd lasted an hour. We trudged another mile and a half in near silence before we felt comfortable stopping for the night. We'd walked far too long already for the day, and we were both exhausted. "Hey, Stephen?" John didn't even glance my way as he pitched his tent. "Yeah? What was that?" John's hands were shaking as he fumbled with the stakes of his tent. I told myself that it was just the exhaustion. I told myself that exhaustion was what made mine tremble too. "It was a bear," I stated plainly. "What else?" I wiped sweat from my brow, and in the brief darkness that swallowed my vision, yellow eyes pierced into me. You know how if you look towards the sun for too long, the white-hot intensity lingers when you close your eyes? I felt it then, but it was a cold, hateful yellow. "I mean, yeah, I get that. Not exactly a ton of big wildlife out here," John replied. "But you did feel it too, right?" "Feel what, dude?" As soon as I'd spat the words, I felt like a dick. John turned to look at me, and I could see he was hurt. Did he look something else? Disappointed, I think, in me? In the obvious damper the eyes had put on our trip? Maybe it was both. "Sorry." The word hung in the air with no response. I felt scared shitless, that's for sure. "That's not what I meant," John muttered as he finalized his arrangements for the night. I wanted to ask for clarification, but it was clear that we were done discussing it for now. We settled into our tents, but I couldn't sleep for shit. I'd bet John couldn't either. As waves of exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, I jumped to a start in my tent, worried that the owner of those eyes was creeping up at that very moment. Thin, long fingers stretching out to grip the zipper of my tent. I wondered if it had seen a zipper before, or if it knew how they worked. "What the fuck is it?" I asked of myself. "I'm worked up over a bear, in Tennessee, in the mountains. Christ, how long have I let myself spiral over the most expected possible thing?" I glanced at my watch and saw that it was well past midnight. We'd been getting up at 6 to start our trek every morning, and I knew that that was going to be painful the next day. In spite of my racing heart, I finally drifted into an anxious sleep. We made it 2 days before we saw them again. Honestly, John and I had all but shed off the terror of those few minutes. We'd picked back up on our excitement and admiration for the trail. We'd also passed a handful of fellow hikers in those 2 days, which was a godsend for settling nerves. We even stopped and shared a little meal with a lovely couple on our 7th night. They contributed some of their food, and we gave some of ours. If nothing else, I think everyone was grateful for a little diversity of taste. Tyler and Sammy were their names. They were from Ohio, somewhere close to Cedar Point, and they'd also been planning their big hike of the trail for quite some time. If you're reading this and they sound familiar, I hope that this brings you any small measure of closure. "We've been loving it," Tyler said with a chuckle. "Loving is maybe a stretch," Sammy said with a little laugh of her own. "I have calluses the size of golf balls on my feet." John and I laughed, enjoying the company of our newfound friends. Dusk dragged darkness over our little group, and everyone knew it was time to part ways. Tyler and Sammy had begun up in Maine and seemed eager to reach their destination in Georgia. "You guys got this, the best part's ahead of you." Tyler turned back and waved as he said this, giving us a little flourish of outstretched arms. "Congrats, y'all!" I shouted back, even if it was a little bit premature. They had already made it so far down the trail I had zero doubt they'd complete their journey. The very next day, as afternoon turned to evening, John stopped dead in his tracks a few paces ahead of me. "What's up, dude? Need a break?" I panted. If I'm being honest, I needed one. "Shh." John jammed his index finger against his lips and pushed his other hand downward, trying with a ferocity to quiet me down. Shut up, shut up!" The words choked their way through John's nearly clenched jaw. "Listen." My heart beat harder and faster than it already had been, but I obeyed. In total silence, John and I listened to the sounds of the darkening woods around us. A gentle crack broke the eerie stillness we'd been experiencing. John pointed immediately in the direction of the sound and looked at me pleadingly. "I heard it," I said, barely audible to myself. John must have understood because he looked relieved immediately. "A deer, maybe? Or another bear, I guess." I held the sound of the S and let it slither through the air as a voice cut me short. "Ahead of you." "What did he—" John waved his hand viciously through the air, signaling me to stop talking. I'd have been offended if I weren't so afraid. The voice cut through the air again, this time louder but no fuller. "The best part's ahead of you." The phrase put a pain in my gut like food poisoning. I knew that phrase and I knew who said it, but I did not know this voice. It evoked within me some sort of auditory uncanny valley which sent waves of goosebumps across my flesh. I could feel a childlike panic overtake my mind. My eyes met John's. He gestured towards the trees. Maybe 50 yards out were the eyes we'd seen 2 days before. My own eyes widened and I shook my head no. I began with a small, almost imperceptible nod, then added vigor as John broke eye contact and stepped in the direction of the voice. "John, I'm fucking begging you right now, do not go over there. John, please fucking please, we don't fucking know him." I couldn't find a good argument, but I prayed that the desperation which powered my whispers would convince my friend not to respond. Primally, evolutionarily, something in my body thrashed against contact with the voice coming from the woods. John turned to me again and nodded his head. He put his finger to his lips again, gentler this time, and motioned for me to wait. We sat in a sudden but welcome silence. My heart rate normalized, no longer slamming my chest but still pumping at twice its normal speed. John and I looked around, each of us seeming to cling to that old childhood feeling of, if I simply stay quiet, the monster in my closet won't come out and get me. "Oh, you guys! An inconceivable volume tore through the still woods. Without looking at each other, John and I burst into a sprint without a destination in mind. We ran. We ran for what felt like 20 minutes. Realistically, it was only 4 or 5, but my lungs writhed in pain beneath my heaving chest. The voice was gone. It had maybe been gone since we first took off. "Stephen." John didn't need to say anything else. He coughed, and I thought he might puke into the bushes. Hell, I thought I might. "I know," I replied simply. "I know. We made a solemn promise to each other that night that we'd make it to the next major departure from the trail, one which would allow us to hitchhike to a town and get the hell out. We both valued the completion of this promise over the breaking of our promise to hike to Maine. I was beyond relieved to see that he was taking those fucking eyes as seriously as I was. John broke both promises. He broke them both in one fell swoop. We chose to start our next day early, desperate to find salvation from the trail. In the early morning light, or the lack thereof, I spotted them first. just off the trail again, peering through the trademark fog that earned the Smokies their name. Truth be told, I hoped that John wouldn't notice. I thought that if we just forged ahead, we could ignore them and be off the trail by mid-afternoon. We were almost out of their view when a voice interrupted the sounds of the forest. "Tyler! Tyler, I'm scared!" Sammy's voice pleaded with the birds and the trees and the dirt. It pleaded with us. It wasn't Sammy's voice, of course, and I knew that. I think John knew it too, but God damn him to hell, he was a fool. Or maybe he didn't know. There's no way to tell at this point. "Sammy? Is that you?" John's voice was a punch to my gut. I turned to watch as he crunched along the underbrush towards the sound. "Tyler? Tyler, please, I'm so afraid. Where did you go?" The voice wavered with what sounded like real tears. "Sammy, it's John. We met a few nights ago. Is everything all right? Did you guys get lost?" John crossed the threshold into the unkempt woods. I stood motionless. My mouth opened and closed over and over. Even the leaves ceased to whisper as I watched my friend move ahead. The eyes were gone. "Stephen, get your ass over here. She needs help. Stephen, come on. Follow me, I think I saw her." John peered around some honeysuckle as he ventured deeper into the woods. Finally, I felt my voice give life to my thoughts, albeit some of my stupider ones. "I don't think we should go out there. The eyes," I whispered meekly. "What? Bro, get over here. I can't even hear you, Jesus Christ." He pushed aside the dense undergrowth and disappeared from my sight. I whimpered. It escaped my lips involuntarily, and I shivered at the sound. I no longer heard Sammy. I no longer heard John. All the sound that remained in the forest was the thumping of my heart and the shifting of leaves overhead. I didn't dare move for fear of betraying my location. All that I could manage was to stare stupidly at the place where John had just been. A voice cut through the silence. "Stephen, get over here, follow me." John's voice sounded like it was just on the other side of the thicket he'd pushed past. Of course it wasn't John. His tone, the way that he ended his sentences, it sounded as if someone had simply recorded and played back John's voice. There was no urgency, no exclamation to mark his intensity. He pleaded, but his voice did not. I said nothing. I did nothing. Next came Sammy. "Where did you go?" The phrase came through identical to how it had only a minute or two ago. I knew that neither Sammy nor John waited for me in the woods, and still I wanted to join them. I wanted to push through the brush and see what hid there. Part of me wanted to die. I was so filled with visceral, inconsolable fear that I would have almost welcomed death just to rid myself of the situation. Maybe it wasn't death even. Maybe. I didn't join my dear friend, nor whatever it was that had taken him. I stood silently as tears ran down my face in steady streams. I don't know how long I stood there, as the passage of time was marked only by the sun and John Sammy's descent into madness. "Stephen! Stephen, follow! Jesus! Jesus Christ! Christ Jesus! Stephen! Stay! Then it was Sammy's turn. "I'm afraid. I'm Tyler, afraid. Tyler where? Tyler where? Afraid. Tyler afraid. I'm so..." Sometimes they ended with guttural grunts and other excruciating noises. Their calls alternated but never overlapped. I stood and listened with dead ears until they finally stopped. Dusk had fallen and my entire body was numb. I let the silence wash over me like forgiveness while I waited. No part of me trusted that the sudden departure of the voices meant safety. Utter darkness had filled the sullen forest before I risked my first movement in hours. One step, just enough to count symbolically, and then I froze again. Only the crunch of leaves under my foot responded to me. Blissful, terrifying silence prevailed. I continued like this, taking only small steps, until I felt I couldn't stand it any longer. I steeled myself, ground my teeth, and took off in a sprint. The unknown that surrounded me filled my mind with eldritch horrors. Things lurked in the trees, real or imagined I'll never know. Yellow, sickly eyes peered out from the undergrowth to meet my blurred eyes. I cried as I ran, choking on harsh air that filled my chest with an excruciating chill. I didn't stop until a root caught my foot and sent me crashing into the ground. I must have laid there crying for hours because when I finally collected myself enough to experience the world around me, Light had crept back through the trees. I thanked God for this small miracle as I rolled onto my back and looked into the thick blanket of leaves above me. I could have tackled him, I thought. I could have tackled him the moment I saw him head for the voice. I knew his dumb ass would go, and I knew how it would end. I did not afford myself any forgiveness at the time. I still don't. I picked myself up off the ground and walked, having no other choice. I knew only a few things for sure. John was most likely dead. I needed to leave the forest, and the way I came had at one point housed the yellow eyes. My goal was to make it to the nearest road and wave down a passing car. I didn't know when that would be, or if anyone would pick up a solo hitchhiker in the woods of Appalachia, but I had to hope. As I came over top of a small hill on the path, I heard another voice. It was another one familiar to me, heard first only a few days prior. The best part? The words slithered out of the woods, as real and tangible as a snake. They curled around my mind as I listened, strangling my thoughts and ceasing all else. I didn't bother to stop moving. In fact, I sped up. I kept my head down, but I could feel yellow eyes watching as I moved. The best part's ahead of you. Tyler's voice was insistent. It demanded I listen. Still I walked. The best part! Tyler's voice warbled and let loose a small growl. I was shaking, but I would not stop. The best part's ahead. Head best part. The best part's head. I almost threw up as the words echoed around me. The best part is the head, I thought. The best part is their head. Bile tore at my throat, burning as it bubbled its way towards my mouth. I forged ahead as I was taunted, never looking back at nor speaking to the monster in the trees. Then came John. "Bro, it's John, help!" Sobs racked my body again as I began to jog. The voices kept a steady pace to my right, always just out of sight but never out of earshot. Just as I ran out of my adrenaline-fueled energy, I broke out of the trees onto a road. Across the empty highway was the re-entrance to the Appalachian Trail, as inviting as it was foreboding. The voices had become such a constant harassment that I hardly noticed their departure. They had begun to fill in the soundscape the same way birds or crickets might. As I stood on the hot asphalt of an unknown road, I realized that I no longer heard anyone. Emboldened by what felt like safety, I risked a glance back at the trees behind me. Shivers ran the length of my body as my eyes met its. Sick and yellow, they stared, somehow emanating hatred and indifference all at once. I want to lie and say that I held its gaze, but I did not. I felt a deep understanding of death, and I looked away, back at the road before me. I did not dare look again, nor did I venture off of the road. Instead, I straddled the yellow line and walked. I walked until my legs gave out. My knees buckled and the weight of my backpack pushed me to the ground. It wasn't long before a car pulled up beside me. It was a Toyota Corolla. The paint job had been red once, but years of use had dulled and rusted it to a hapless brown. I'd never seen a car so beautiful in my entire life. The man who invited me in had questions, lots of them, but seemed to pick up on my shell-shocked nature. I'm guessing he just thought I was another failure to complete, someone who couldn't finish the trail and had to tap out. I chose to let him believe so. When he asked where to take me, I said only 2 words: police station. It took us maybe 20 minutes to get there, and in that time I gave up on justice. I knew what would happen if I told the truth. I would argue, they would tell me I imagined things. Maybe they'd even suspect things of me. I didn't want to go to an asylum, and I didn't want to be a mockery. What I wanted most was to get John back, but I knew that he was gone. The police had all sorts of questions. How John and I got separated, if I knew exactly where he'd fallen off the path, if I knew for sure he was dead, and many more. I told them that he left the trail because he thought he heard someone in trouble. True. And that he fell down a steep drop he hadn't seen. Untrue. I said that I went to check on him. Untrue. And that I knew he was dead. True. I found that this balance of truths and untruths gave me some measure of comfort, an oasis of honesty within my desert of lies. The most important thing now was to discourage anyone from going to find him, and to make certain that I did not provide his family any false hope. Eventually the police let me go, and they even offered to provide me transport back to where we started in Tennessee. An officer drove down with me so that he could be the one to tell John's family. I asked that I join him. The hours I spent with them were the most painful I've ever experienced, filled with agony and lies. Much to my chagrin, his sobbing mother, a woman who'd been around for almost all of my life, begged the officer to send a team to recover John's body. I wanted to argue to try to prevent anyone from ever being victim to those eyes again, but what could I say? It's been a few weeks now. I'm not sure what happened to that task force, but I can guarantee they never found John's body. I only hope that everyone made it back okay. I don't have the heart to look into it. In the time since, people from my town have started to go missing. A serial killer, they've labeled it. The Collins Street killer. It's in all the papers. First the nice old lady from down the road, then the kid catty corner from my place. Yesterday, my neighbor joined the growing list. It was my fault. Tom, the guy next door, called me yesterday late into the evening. "Hey, Steven, how you holding up, man?" "Just, going day by day, I guess." I tried not to let my defeat be heard. "You staying safe? You know, with all the disappearances?" Tom was beating around the bush. "Yeah, Tom, I'm safe. How about you?" I looked into my bathroom mirror, trying not to linger on the bags beneath my eyes. "I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Hey, I really don't want to upset you. I know you've got a ton on your mind already, but do you hear something out back?" He waited for my response. My stomach hurt so badly I couldn't speak for a moment. "Hear what, Tom?" "I know how it sounds. I swear to God, I know how it sounds, but I keep hearing John." There was a long pause. "Out behind our houses, somewhere in the trees. I swear he's saying your name, Stephen." I grit my teeth against the pain in my gut. "Tom, I need you to hear what I'm about to say. It is very important that you listen to me." Tom chuckled, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "I don't, well, Tom, seriously," I interrupted. "Do not for any reason step into the woods. John is not out there. He's dead. Do you hear me? John is dead. And whatever you think you're hearing, you are not hearing that." I didn't mean to be cruel, but I couldn't stand the thought of another person losing their life. I knew what waited in the tree line behind our houses, and I knew that to engage with those fucking yellow eyes was a death sentence. "Yeah, no, you're right. I know that. I just thought you might want to know. Just in case." "There is no just in case, Tom. God damn it, there is no just in case. John is dead. Just stay your ass inside." I hung up the phone. I felt horrible immediately, but I didn't know any other way to get the message through. Hands shaking, I walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of Tito's. I took a shot and chased it with lemonade. I took another shot, then another. It wasn't long before the bottle was empty. When I woke up this morning, hungover and sweaty, the police were next door. Tom was gone. I'm writing this because as I sit on my back porch and look out to the woods, Tom is calling out. "Need help?" he asks. The question was surely to John, asked into the void late last evening. "I'm on my way," says Tom. God bless his naive soul. Should you find this post and think that I'm insane, torn up over the loss of my best friend, maybe driven mad by having left him for dead in the Appalachian Mountains, it doesn't matter. Just promise that you'll never interact with the yellow eyes. You can promise it to me. You can swear it to God. I don't care. Do not speak with the yellow eyes in the woods. I'm going out there. Here in the next few minutes. I hope it's swift, painless. I hope that my voice doesn't haunt the woods of my town, and I hope that it never lures an unsuspecting victim to their death. I don't know why, but I believe that if I give myself over, this'll all stop. The eyes have followed me all the way home, still seeking me out. I pray that if I walk into the woods, voice silent but for one response, that the eyes will return to somewhere in the wilderness. I'll say to whomever reads this, and to John, Tyler, Sammy, Tom, to everyone, I'll say to everyone what I will say as I enter the woods. I'm sorry.